Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. Today I'm joined by Sarah Green, who is Chief Executive at Newcastle Gateshead Initiative. I've known Sarah for many years and I've always been really impressed by her energy and her enthusiasm. She's a really passionate advocate for the North East region, and I'm looking forward to talking to her today about her personal journey, but also about the region and what's in store for Newcastle Gateshead in the future. Hi Sarah, thanks for joining me this morning. You're currently the Chief Executive at NGI, the Newcastle Gateshead Initiative. But people might not realise that you once started work with me 20 odd years ago as a lawyer. Mm-hmm. So how does a lawyer become the Chief Exec of Newcastle Gateshead Initiative?
Oh, we have to go back even before you, Gill, before I started working with you. I'd already done about 2 pivots by that point. So I started work in London at Clifford Chance as a lawyer. And in lots of ways, I probably started as a lawyer because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, like loads of people in the world. And in some ways, do you ever find out what you want to do? But I had a brilliant time. I worked in London, Hong Kong, Shanghai, but I hated the 6 minutes of life as a lawyer. I'm not very good at kind of 6-minute discipline. So I kind of thought maybe it wasn't for me. And I went off, and when I was in China, it was the era of knowledge management. And for any lawyers listening, it was the era of Susskind, and it was going to be the end of law, where we're going to be automated out and everything was going to change overnight.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's 20 years ago, and it still hasn't happened. So, it says what we know about technology. But so I did the knowledge management strategy when out in China as part of the Clifford Chance team. I was kind of one of the China reps. And I thought this is really interesting, and it's not in 6-minute things, and it's kind of more the business and commercial end of it. So I came back and after a short bit went and worked for Arthur Andersen. But then Arthur Andersen was hit by Enron. But by that stage, kind of the knowledge management piece had moved into internal comms to some extent, because they're very closely related. So I had the privilege of kind of working in the team that were kind of managing the crisis that was Enron at Andersen. And I realised that you could go into other professional service firms, but it gave me an opportunity at that point to come back to the North East. And as I say, for me, I left Newcastle when I was 14, and I talk about being 14 years in exile because it is very much my home and I'm very much rooted in it. So after 14 years in exile, I thought it was time to come back. And that's when I met you. And actually, by this stage, I'd met my partner, Mark, and he was in law, and it was his recruitment consultant. I was talking to him. He says, "What are you going to do when you get back?" And I said, "I don't really know. I haven't worked that out." Started a master's in urban regeneration because I'm really interested in how the region has changed dramatically in that 14 years I've been in exile, but I don't know how to use it. He said, "What did you do?" And I said, "Oh, I used to be a lawyer." He said, "Don't worry, I can get you a job in law." And that's how I came back at Muckle. And it didn't last very long, because then I remembered that I didn't like 6 minutes and I wasn't very good at it.
Yeah, there was a memorable Christmas Eve, I think, wasn't there? Where I think you had your epiphany and went, "Oh, this definitely isn't for me."
Yeah, get me out of here. What do you want for Christmas? Just to leave law a second time. So I left a second time and went and worked for One North East, the regional development agency. And then, do you want me to?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey.
Yeah, so I worked at One North East. And again, I thought that would be, for me, an organisation that was going to make the North East a better place. It sounded like utopia. It was about making it a better place for the children that I was going to have, for my parents, for my friends, for everybody in the North East, something I felt really, really kind of passionately about. But it was really interesting. But it was a big public sector organisation, and I'd never worked in the public sector before in that way. And I suppose I was quite challenged by the level of bureaucracy and the amount of form filling, and it wasn't the utopia again that perhaps a enthusiastic young person at that stage was aspiring to. And then I got pregnant, had my first daughter, and on coming back from that, I got approached by the CBI to go and join them as regional director in the North East. And that was really fascinating because I got to know loads of businesses in the region. And I did that for 8 years, and that felt like in 2 parts because I had Barney 4 years into that. And that during that period, Northern Rock fell, and we had the 2008 crisis. So I had 4 years of kind of land of milk and honey, and then 4 years of real austerity and real challenges to the business community. So whilst I was there for quite a long time, it felt like, and I was working with a lot of the same businesses, it felt like a really different world. And navigating how businesses take those challenges on, etc., is really interesting to be part of, listening to people and engaging with people during that. And whilst there's not a huge amount, in some ways you feel a bit helpless, but actually it's a real privilege that they allowed you in to tell you a bit of their story. And then I went national with CBI, so I looked after all the regions and nations. And that was really interesting and was a real management challenge. But I never left the Northeast as home, but I felt that I felt I'd lost some of my roots. I felt I'd lost a bit of me because I didn't represent anything specific, representing regions and nations. It's not, the nations were Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales. It wasn't glamorous nations. Well, they're brilliant nations, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, but it wasn't overseas. And then it was a lot of travelling, huge amount of travelling. And I just thought, you know what, I need to be closer to home. So I decided that my thing was I was going to be a researcher, because I've always been this butterfly and done kind of broad areas of stuff, but at quite a light level. So I thought instead I'm going to become deep in something and I'm going to do a PhD. And I got a scholarship at Durham and I started it. And for the first 6 months or whatever, because it was brilliant, just having my books and sitting. And I love a library card. So a university library card, I'll do anything for. So I'm something like 5 degrees in, just because I kind of, I've got this addiction to library cards. But even then, for me, about 18 months in, I was finding it really tough. And then I got a knock on the door from an old colleague who said, I need someone to come in and be an interim. It's just a few months, and then you can go back and finish your PhD. And it was winter. And I thought, oh yeah, that'd be quite nice to be with people for a few months. And that's when I came into the NGI role. And it was really tough. We had to go through a big restructure. But we just finished the restructure and COVID hit. We went into lockdown. But I loved the people and I loved the values of the organisation and what it was about and what it could achieve. And I'm still there. I haven't left. So it's none of this is a very planned story, I suppose, is the piece you can take out of it. A lot
Have you finished your PhD then?
Finishes 31st of May. So
and
7 years. 7 years. Social impact of small businesses in rural communities. So I did the one before the MBA was a Masters in Urban Regeneration. So I thought I needed to balance it with a bit of rural stuff. So I've now done the urban and the rural and a bit of the business stuff in between. So we'll see what's next. But honestly, if I mention something next to library cards anytime soon, whackers and say, don't, go and do something fun instead.
It's a bit like, after I had my second child, I can remember saying to my mother, if I ever show any signs of wanting to have another one, just remind me of this moment.
Go and get a dog.
Yeah, that's what I did.
That's what happens, isn't it?
So NGI, for people who are listening who don't know what NGI does and what it is, can you tell us a bit about what it's about?
So NGI's role is to attract stuff to the Northeast, particularly Newcastle and Gateshead. So we run the Invest Newcastle brand, which is all about bringing capital investment and foreign direct investment in terms of companies here. We do under the NGI banner, we do all of the visitor information stuff, all activity around driving tourism and supporting the visitor economy here in Newcastle Gateshead. And Newcastle's got a brilliant reputation as a staycation city, really strong kind of creative vibe about it at the moment. So real opportunities around that. And we also want it to be a great place to live, work, etc. And we think that all of these kind of play together. So if you come for investment purposes and you have a really poor hotel stay, then you're not going to come back. If you come and you don't like the city centre, you're not going to invest, you're not going to study here, you're not going to work here. So we see it as our job to kind of create those brilliant first dates through the visitor economy and then use our activity to bring investment and embed it in the city, which then brings more people here, creates more jobs, creates opportunities and hopefully then drives back into the hospitality and visitor economy again.
So what are some of the things over the last 4 years that you've done that you really think are sort of pivotal things that are making a big impact on the region?
So we've got huge, the inward investment numbers are really, really strong for this region. And if you look at the number of American investors coming in, particularly in the tech and digital spaces, some of the spaces you're looking at, if you look at the life science creation piece, if you look at some of the capital investment, you only need to look at like Helix and what's come out the ground there from nothing, and then the businesses that are in Helix now. And that kind of vibe that's coming through. And as we get the housing around that, etc., it'll become a really interesting part. Real opportunities now coming down on Fourth Yard, so further over in the city. And we've just been at MIPIM, the urban festival of really pitching that in terms of getting international investors to invest in our city and bring that to life. You look at Pilgrim Street, you look at the jobs that have come into Pilgrim Street, but interesting, you look at the hotel that's coming on, the Gotham, which is an amazing investment. And I think we've got 6 large hotel developments in town at the moment.
Wow.
And that's really exciting. We also do some work directly. We've got this unique status with government, which is called Destination Development Partnership, which we're the only region in the country to get this money from DCMS and Visit England, which is around bringing the visitor economy together and really looking at how we can accelerate the growth. So we've got 2.25 million over 3 years. And that was really exciting because we're the first place to get that. And we really need to drive our visitor economy because, as I say, it is the first date to everything else. If we don't get that right, then we're losing that opportunity. And we really, for the quality of our assets across the region, and I do mean the region, we just don't get the number of visitors, particularly international visitors, that we should get. And people don't get that it's 12 minutes from Newcastle City Centre to Durham, and you can see, the cathedral, a World Heritage Site. And it's utterly amazing. And yet so many people will come for business or for a conference in Newcastle and not make that journey. If that was 2 tube stops in London, everyone would do it. They just don't have that understanding of proximity and opportunity yet. And it's our job to keep telling that narrative.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think we're the sort of unsung heroes of the country? Because whenever you go, I've just come back from a holiday in the Far East, and you talk to people there, and they immediately say, when you say you're from the UK, you're from London, straight away, and they've never heard of Newcastle, let alone Gateshead. So it's why do you think that is, and how can you shift that narrative?
So 56% of people internationally cannot imagine anywhere in England outside London. So if you said draw a picture of anywhere in England, all they would draw is kind of Paddington style London. And it's a very romanticised, nostalgic view of London, that London's this lovely little Notting Hill community where everyone chats to one another and, there's a bookshop on the corner. So it's not even a real view of London.
Yeah.
But we just got the most centralised economy of almost any country, any Western European country, definitely. All of our airports, well, not all, but all of the, historically, the significant air hubs, so over 60% of our gateway flights come in to London and the Southeast. Historically, we promote London far more than anything else. London then has the businesses and the partnership connections that amplify that. So, people like BA's marketing budget is significant. It flies into London as a hub. Therefore, the images that people see around the world become of London. We do need to break that. And that's why devolution and the point where we are with policy is so important. Because I think I was reading a stat last week that says about 86% of the North post this elections coming up will now be devolved with their own mayors. And we are seeing a power move from Westminster to the regions. And I don't think many people have caught up with what that means in policy. It's going to require a huge shift of thinking in terms of how you influence things and how things will change. That's a massive opportunity for us. And we just need to capitalise it and make it happen.
And what role will NGI have in that post-devolution?
So, we're working it through. Look, we haven't even got a mayor in post yet. So what we will now is we will still need a really strong gateway in Newcastle to the wider region, and that the assets that are in Newcastle and Gateshead will still need to be promoted. But equally, the region, we need scale. Where Manchester works is because it's got scale, and it hasn't only just got scale within Manchester, it's very close to Leeds, Liverpool, Sheffield, Bradford. They're all within a kind of travel to work piece. Our uniqueness is that actually for a city, we've got, there isn't that much around us. That means that we're the perfect small city. I call us the Goldilocks city, in that we're just the right size. We've got one of everything, but we're not too big, but we're equally not too small. It's all happening here, but you can walk around it in 15 minutes. Yeah. And I think we need to embrace that and use that as a kind of, if you want to be somewhere that's unique but manageable, then this is the place to be. And we're never going to be the biggest. So we have to kind of play to our alternativeness and be confident in who we are. And I don't think that's always going to be looking to Westminster. I think we should be looking out to Northern Europe. And, a lot of people, when I talk to them, see Newcastle more in terms of kind of some of our Nordic Scandinavian cities than they do in terms of relationship with the southeast of England.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, going back to the One Northeast days when we had passionate people, passionate places, felt like it was something that united the region behind one brand. Do you think a regional brand would help to move that forwards?
So Passionate People, Passionate Places was brilliant at uniting internally. Its original objective was pitching externally. It probably didn't achieve that kind of cut through in terms of national or international recognition of brand. You've got to look at budgets. And one of the challenges one of the opportunities is that it's not the level of budget that you can put behind these things is relatively small compared to other people's budgets and others' opportunity for amplification. And it's football brands that cut through. So the best thing that's happened to us in Newcastle is the football club getting back into European football, the football club pitching itself, travelling the world again, back out in Atlanta, back in Saudi, bringing in more clubs here. The women's stuff as well, the women's football being on the same stage as the men's football is brilliant messages. And, from you just talking about travelling, people say where you're from or where have you come from, and you end up saying, regardless of where you are in the region, you end up quite often at Newcastle, and they go, Newcastle United, black and white. And that recognition that comes from football and the amplification through 90 minutes on screens that are projected through. The Premier League is the biggest football franchise in the world, and that appears on screens everywhere you go. So there is an innate recognition of Newcastle as a brand. We now need to put that narrative behind it, and then we need to link the regional assets. And there will be times where it's appropriate to go out in the Northeast, but there are definitely times where the arrowhead has to follow where the recognition already is.
Yeah, I think that, I agree with that. And I think the way that we're carving up responsibility around the 7 local authorities, Durham being responsible for culture, etc. I think that is helpful, because then you're creating new beacons within the region that people can associate things with. I mean, it's brilliant, exciting things. It feels like it's the region's moment.
It is.
At this point in time.
We were in Cannes last week, as I say, we had 50 private sector and public sector representatives with us. People were saying things like, it's the new Manchester. Now, I don't want to be... Manchester. It's not the new Manchester on Manchester's terms, but this idea that the excitement that was around Manchester 10 years ago in terms of kind of the new kid on the block was coming our way. And that's what we have to bottle, that hope, that confidence, that determination that kind of, we can do this. We can be the perfectly small formed package that has a real place to play in the world.
Just popping in to say, if you are enjoying the conversation so far and want to make sure you keep up to date with other episodes, then please hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Let's jump back into the conversation now. So back to you, a bit about you. So this is where you're obviously massively passionate about the region and what you're doing. And I know you also have a lot of non-exec roles outside of your day job. And a lot of those are around culture around heritage. Why have you chosen those things to focus on?
I think we do things that interest you, don't we? And so I'm senior member of council with the National Trust, which is one of those really weird titles. But I started with National Trust just because I have really fond memories of going with my grandma to Cragside. Yeah. And that, it starts there and says, well, actually, and I'm really fascinated by Lord Armstrong and that story, which kind of ties through our inward investment work, our visitor economy work. So it really did just start with this, wow, this is a huge organisation that manages assets that are behind a paywall, that manages most of our coastline and does all of these things with thousands and thousands of volunteers. Like, how does it work? How do I get a bit of an insight? And I think I just naturally I am curious about those things and I wanted to know more. So I thought, well, what better way? So it's an elected post. So that was as close as I've ever got to kind of being voted in for anything. And so, yeah.
What was your campaign strapline?
You're not allowed to campaign.
Oh, right,
it's very National Trust. So you're not allowed to campaign. But yeah, then you get this amazing thing that 20,000 people have voted for you. And you're like, well, And then your mum goes, oh, I forgot. I didn't get It's like, oh, that's not even my mum's voted for us. But there's somebody out there. And it's really funny, like, how people hold institutions like that close to their heart and make the effort. So I do that just for passion. And then I've done a lot with universities at different points. And I'm involved with Ryder Architecture. And I just love them because I always feel, and particularly when I'm talking to someone like you, Gill, I feel a bit of a fraud sometimes because I've ended up in a position where often I'm working with businesses rather than the one taking the risk. Now as chief exec of NGI, we've got a balance sheet of kind of just over 3 million, but it's still, we're still very much in that SME space. Whereas you look at what somebody like Mark Thompson's done at Ryder and how he's grown that business, headquartered from the Northeast to winning UK Architecture Firm of the Year. And I just really admire that entrepreneurial spirit and that ability to make decisions really quickly and to run sometimes with good instinct that kind of scares me coming from my background. It's like, where's the paper on it? And it's like, there's no paper on it. We're just doing it. But yeah. And so being involved with that kind of gives you that energy, that entrepreneurial energy. So, and I think the great thing about when you get to the point where you do a few non-exec things is they don't have to make sense in an overall narrative. You can just choose things that interest you, and if they'll have you involved, then that's brilliant, isn't it? It's like the best ever.
No, that resonates with me, as well. That's my non-exec positions are all things that I'm just passionate about. They have absolutely nothing to do with law. Yeah, I might bring a bit of legal view on things from time to time, but more they're things I'm passionate about, really, more than anything else. I mean, you're quite self-effacing in terms of talking about, you're not the one taking the risks and it's not your money and all of that sort of stuff. But when you look at your career and your life path, there have been lots of times when you've pivoted, you've taken risks, you've stepped out of your comfort zone, you've ditched what a lot of people would have considered to be quite particularly at the time when you were doing it in law, very sort of stable, well-paid roles that you could have progressed through doing that, but you've chosen not to, and you followed your instincts all the way along. And the podcast's called Fear Less, Do More. What do you think for you when you face those moments? Do you feel fear?
Well, it looks illogical, but it was logical to me because as we talked about that kind of day before Christmas where I thought I'm really not enjoying this. It's more illogical to continue with something you don't enjoy than it is to jump off and think I can give it another go. And I think it's a lot to do with what you've got to lose at certain points. And at that point, I didn't have any children, I didn't have any... What's the worst? I'm sure somehow I can make enough to live off. And I'm not flash, I don't have fancy cars or kind of, fancy things. And so... my definition of luxury has always been, and I stand by this at every city, is being able to go to the supermarket and not worry about how much I've spent. So I can have whatever I want within, reason within a supermarket, or I love a charity shop. So being able to blow as much as I want in the charity shop. And if that's your definition of luxury, that is it's a real privileged position to be in. And I know in the Northeast, there is thousands of people who don't have that privilege. So I don't underestimate it at any level, but equally it does give you a certain amount of resilience to do those jumps, because you think, as long as I can feed myself at that stage, then we're fine. And as as you move on, then you've got dependence, etc. Then there's a little bit more about, what does this mean for us collectively? But I'm really lucky. I'm in a long-term stable relationship, and we've always acted as a partnership in that one of us jumps off at different times. So as long as you coordinate the jumping and the pivoting, then between you can manage it. And that's given me a lot of flexibility to do things. And I suppose you say they're fearless. That assumes you sit and think. And in a sense, you don't sit and think at those moments. You often just dive. And I do think that once you stop thinking of yourself in a bubble or in a particular shaped box, it's amazing how quickly other people adjust to that. It's our self-belief. I've talked to so many lawyers in particular who say, well, I couldn't do anything else. And I'm like, really? Like, of course. Look at all of the skills you use every day. Of course you can. You just struggle with moving your definition of yourself from, it's really easy. Someone says, what do you do? Or I'm a lawyer, I'm a partner in law firm. It's much more difficult trying to explain what I do. But why is it relevant other than to the business? My identity is not based around my career at any point. It's just me.
So outside of work and your other non-exec stuff that you do, and obviously completing your PhD, what makes you tick? What do you like to do?
I love junk. I absolutely love junk. I love the serendipity of going into a charity shop and thinking, what might I find? It's like the opposite of John Lewis, where someone's trying to edit me life and tell us what I should wear and do and think. And I just love collecting junk. But the problem is that I don't like any one thing. Once somebody gives me something or I buy something that I like, it always ends up being a collection. So I have many collections and they take up space.
Like what?
So since I was young, somebody gave me once a handkerchief vase, which is, they're effectively like a flat piece of glass that someone's gone like that with, and squeezed. So they're like got pointy corners.
Oh yes.
Now produced by Wilkins. I really like them because they're working class glass, because people get quite airy-fairy and kind of, highfalutin about glass and say, it's such and such Murano, whatever. But these were produced by Woolworths, and they were what housewives would have bought with the extra penny or whatever that they hadn't spent on their shopping. So I really like them, and I've got them in thousands of different, thousands is an exaggeration. I think I must have about 70. And wow. Mark always says, if something happens to you, the first thing that's happening is those vases are going to recycling. So that's my reason to hang on in there. Keep those vases, and I'll make sure I'm not really bothered about wills, but I'll make sure it's signed in that whoever gets a penny from us, gets all the vases.
I always remember as well that if you got a thing about sort of Chinese furniture.
Yeah, I've got when I came back from China, I didn't bring any furniture back. And then when I was at Muckles, I went to an auction and I was slightly hungover, and I like auctions. And I started bidding on stuff, and effectively in the end, everybody stopped bidding against us. So I ended up with a house full. I had nothing, and ended up with a house full of Chinese furniture, so much that I had to give some to mum and dad. And I've still, so that's there's a Chinese furniture thing with some very strange glass vases going on it. So it's an eclectic house, put it that way, eclectic.
And if tomorrow you could have a month off and you couldn't do anything to do with work or any of your non-exec stuff and not finishing your PhD, what would you use that time to do? Money's no object, all barriers removed.
Oh God, you go travelling, wouldn't you? Yeah, I'd get on a plane and go away. I feel I do feel less travelled at the moment. I've got my youngest is doing GCSEs and it feels like with the combination of school holidays and kind of he's not that keen on travelling. I do feel like I need to springboard out. So I'd springboard out and go and see something, but it probably would involve some markets and bringing back some junk.
So what does the future hold then? Looking forward, where do you think, as I said, this is a proper interview question, where do you think you'll be in 5 years' time?
Wow. In the words of Karen Carpenter, I think it's only just begun. And I've been thinking about it a lot because it's a big birthday coming up tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the club.
But I think that's, I think it does make you think backwards, but equally it makes you look forward. And I do think that there's so much more that can be done. And rather than feeling like, oh, what have you done? It feels like, actually, how do I harness what I know, the people I know, the things that I feel passionately about them and take them to the next level? And the amazing thing is I do genuinely think that this region and Newcastle in particular, we're on the cusp of something. We've got so many exciting things happening. The football club's doing well. Eldon Square's being redeveloped in a way that's going to look amazing. We've got all these new developments in Fourth Yards, the science stuff happening. We've got on the Gateshead side, the Riverside Renaissance, the quayside. The river, whilst amazing, is still, could be utilised more and more and more. 2028, we've got an opportunity to showcase this part of the world on the international stage with Euros 28, and it's the centenary of the Tyne Bridge. And I do think those moments come together. We've just got to capitalise on it. Then we'll look to 2032 will be 150 years of the Toon not being the Toon, it becoming a city. So it's the 150th anniversary of Newcastle as a city because it's when the church became a cathedral. And I think, again, if we look at this in kind of, I'm quite simple in that I can do 4 years at a time, but I can't do huge runs. But I think there's this 4-year period where we get everything ready for 2028. We get that Tyne Bridge painted and looking spanking again. And then we look to 2032. And then we, beyond that, I genuinely think we're in such an exciting part of the world. We've got to take confidence. I want to be part of that story, but we can be absolutely incredible. And the thing about the story of the Northeast is it's all about collaboration. It's about people who know one another. It's about working in partnership. It is small enough that you can put your arms around one another and it's a proper community. I say we're black, we're white, but we're never beige. We're not going to be boring. We're going to do it on our terms. And we can, everybody loves a Geordie and we just need to get out there and tell our story. So it is a continuation, but it's more, it's bigger, it's better. And it's together. It's not any one of us. It's something we can all do together.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's we've got, as we said previously, I feel like we're on the cusp of something. We've got huge opportunities coming up and it would be brilliant to see the region on an international stage where when you go on holiday and you say you're from the UK, they say, are you from Newcastle? That would be
That's the way forward. I'll drink to that. Where's the coffee?
Thanks ever so much for joining me, Sarah. It's been great to chat to you and I'm really looking forward to seeing the part that you'll play in the elevation of the region outside.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that episode of our podcast, Fear Less Do More. If you did, then please follow or subscribe. If you enjoyed what we talked about in this episode, then you might enjoy this one here, which is also linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening.